Cheyenne was walking through a forest. A mysterious, oppressive silence surrounded her. The trees were arranged symmetrically and formed a straight path. She had no choice but to walk along this path and see where it led, for there was impenetrable thorn bushes behind the trees. The further she got, the louder it became. The peace was disturbed by death cries of tormented people, animals, and demons, but far and wide there was nothing to be seen of the suffering. The path became steadily narrower and ended unexpectedly in a dead end, in the form of a rock face. Suddenly Cheyenne got an eerie feeling. She thought she was being followed, and felt a look on the back of her neck that gave her goosebumps. Her heart beat faster, and the tree seemed to grow taller. She got scared. Suddenly all sounds fell silent, and it became quiet. The uneasy silence did not last long, however, for a clearing of the throat could be heard behind the girl. Cheyenne turned around in a flash, and couldn't believe what she saw next. Her eyes filled with tears, which fell down in streams from her cheeks to the ground. An emotional chaos consisting of happiness, joy of reunion, emotional pain, and bewilderment ensued. All danger and the eeriness of this environment were forgotten, and Cheyenne felt a pleasant security in its place. A few meters in front of her stood her grandfather and looked at her. Nothing could have stopped the girl from running off to the old man she had missed so much. She was overjoyed to see him again, for she had believed that he was dead and gone from her life forever. Cheyenne had obviously misjudged the way to her grandfather, because she had to walk further than expected. When she finally arrived at the beloved family member, she embraced him stormily. She pressed herself tightly against her grandfather and drenched his shoulders with her tears of joy. She felt so incredibly comfortable and happy at that moment, and yet there was something that suppressed the security and made her feelings seem fake. The grandfather was freezing cold. Cheyenne didn't feel a heartbeat or breathing. He didn't move and didn't put his arms around his granddaughter. Silence. But now the old man finally raised his arms, and the girl thought that he had just been so overwhelmed to see her that he couldn't react in bewilderment. His hands moved to Cheyenne's forehead. He stroked her cheek and then ran both palms down her neck. The grandfather's fingers stopped the movement as soon as they arrived at his granddaughter's collarbone. Suddenly he gripped Cheyenne's neck tightly and grabbed it with a tremendous pressure. He lifted the girl up a little so that she was no longer standing on her own feet, but above the ground. Then he choked off his granddaughter's air to breathe, and squeezed even harder than before. Cheyenne tried to break away from the grip and wanted to scream and ask why her grandfather was doing this, but she only managed to chuckle hoarse sounds. The old man's good-natured eyes turned into a colorless white, and he threw the girl away from him. The landing fell too hard for a grassy ground, but Cheyenne couldn't deal with it right now. She coughed, wheezed, and breathed heavily. Disappointment, fear, despair, immeasurable sadness, and a guilty conscience haunted her head. She blamed herself, even though she didn't know for what. Why? What did I do? She turned on her side and felt her hand bump into something. The girl saw an old broken shoe, and she looked up at the person who was wearing it. In front of Cheyenne stood her grandmother, and another emotional chaos arose. The granddaughter stood up and embraced the old lady as well, but the old lady immediately pushed her away from her. She fell to the ground again, and now wept tears of pain. Her soul felt as if it had been pierced with swords, burned with fire, and then the flame frozen with eternal ice. so that it blazes forever inside and the agony never ends. Cheyenne was rejected by her beloved grandparents, and her grandfather had even tried to kill her. And this despite the fact that they had just found each other again. She felt the emptiness inside her turn into depression when she saw her grandmother's wide eyes staring at her coldly. But the granddaughter would rather be killed by her grandparents than do the same and cast them out. The girl loved the two old people, and it would stay that way no matter what happened now. She wanted to be with them forever. She had missed the two so much and didn't want to feel the suffering of the loss again. The feeling of irrationality flowed through her, but she didn't care. Cheyenne tried to sit up and looked at her grandmother. At that very moment she felt a sharp stabbing pain that stretched from her left ear over the entire side of her face, and had such a force that she fell to the side. She felt wet, red liquid drip to the floor, and soaked it. Blood. The girl flinched in fright and touched the wounded spot with 2 fingers. Then she looked at the color that could now be seen on it and sobbed. Cheyenne's gaze fell again on her grandmother, who was standing in front of her, holding a sharp kitchen knife in her hand, on which fresh blood stuck and also dripped to the floor. The grandfather stood next to the old lady, and both looked at their granddaughter. They opened their mouths, and a duet of gruesome ghostly voices sounded. "You made us suffer and handed us over to death. It's your fault. It's your fault. It's your fault. You killed us. You alone. It's your fault." The voices turned into a mischievous, malicious laugh, and the wrinkles of the old people grew larger, and blood gushed out of them. Countless flesh wounds appeared on the bodies and bones were exposed. Cheyenne was lying in a pool of blood from her beloved family. The grandfather reached out and slapped his granddaughter in the face with the flat of his hand, so hard that a bloody handprint could be seen on the girl's left cheek, and her wound bleeding stopped there. The ground beneath her gave way, and she sank into a square lake of red liquid. In her head she heard the mocking laughter of her grandparents, and the agonizing screams that came from the thorn bushes, and had previously fallen silent, returned. Cheyenne could no longer breathe, and she was imprisoned in all the blood. Her eyes burned like hell, and she tasted the guilt and death on her tongue. Then she heard a snort. A brown horse with blue antennae had appeared above the lake of blood, its unnatural white eyes staring at Cheyenne angrily and reproachfully. The mouth looked as if the animal was grinning mischievously, and it rose. The girl saw the names and hearts on the hoofs when they were above her head. "No, not you either, Falcon Heart." The horse shoes turned white and came towards Cheyenne. They hit her head and smashed her skull. Everything turned white. A single scream, tormented by suffering, could be heard, deafeningly loud. The one from the girl itself. Cheyenne woke up in tears. She was distraught and shocked, leaning half lying against a tree and not even noticing that she had screamed. Then she saw Glacio kneeling next to her. He looked at her worriedly, and she returned to reality. Her lungs hurt like hell, and after this desperate scream she could hardly breathe. Her whole body felt a little numb, but at the same time she trembled incredibly and felt enormous pain. She tensed up when she began to feel all this and kept still while tears still flitted down her cheeks. Her head felt as if it had been hit against a stone countless times, and her left hand was covered with herbal paste, wrapped in green leaves, and it tingled a little painfully in this area of skin. A wooden stick held the forearm straight. Cheyenne sniffled, not knowing what to think, where she was, what was going on. Her soul felt empty and imprisoned in an endless sadness. The girl raised her head and looked at Glacio again while she sobbed. He didn't ask any questions and just looked at her compassionately, worriedly, and understandingly. Cheyenne couldn't take it anymore and threw herself at the healer's neck. She accepted the pain of the jerky movement and clung to Glacio. The tears came in streams from her closed eyes, and he let her be. The calming effect of the combination of cold and winter scent was once again instantaneous and helped Cheyenne, at least somewhat. She noticed how much she had cramped her fingers and loosened them. She hoped that the clawing grip hadn't been too painful for the healer. The girl didn't quite know if Glacio was overwhelmed by the situation or if he just didn't expect her to hug him, because he only hesitantly raised his hands. He didn't seem to know if he should really touch her, but then he plucked up the courage, put one hand on his prodigy's back, and stroked her head and hair with the other. Cheyenne now felt more comfortable and also a bit secure. She could slowly stop crying and lay still in his arms. He now put his chin on the head of his prodigy. Cheyenne didn't care if he was okay with her lying in his arms. She just wanted to feel someone's closeness and affection now, and actually she couldn't imagine that he didn't like the hug of a girl. In addition, he always had such a calming charisma, an advantage in this disturbing situation. Besides, Sasha didn't seem to be around at the moment. The two remained in this position for a few seconds before the healer tried to take away his prodigy's sadness in a calm, whispering voice. "Hey, little angel, have you had a nightmare? No wonder with all that you have experienced. No matter what happened in it, it was just a dream. None of that just happened, because you've been here the whole time. I haven't let you out of my sight. Would have been a bit too risky for me, after Sasha gave me the order with a deadly serious face. All of us have bad dreams sometimes, so don't take it too hard, do you? All is well, little doll." A nightmare. Yes, that had been it. But it was so real, and it's all true what they said. Although Cheyenne was now convinced that it must have been a dream, she couldn't shake off the spark of reality in it. Nevertheless, she had become very calm at Glacio's words, and already felt much better. The girl had arrived back in reality, and wiped the last tears from her face. She was glad not to be alone, and a little surprised at the healer's understanding. After all, her behavior was more reminiscent of a toddler than a 17-year-old girl, and she would expect Glacio to pat her on the back and make fun of her in his arrogant way. But nothing of the kind happened. She was very grateful to him for that. Cheyenne pulled away from the healer a little, and her face was now opposite his. Even when sitting, she was still a lot smaller than him. The girl looked at him sadly and noticed that his blue eyes were the most beautiful she had ever seen. She had already noticed that Glacio was handsome, but never before she had noticed his eyes as much as she did at this moment. They radiated intelligence, cunning, understanding, kindness, but also a certain emptiness and sadness hidden deep down. "Now he seems like a real friend to me again, instead of a stranger. Glacio and his many personalities." Cheyenne averted her gaze and sighed. The pain in her lungs became somewhat bearable again, and she compared the words of her grandparents in her dream with those in reality. I saw my grandparents in the dream. They didn't want me anymore and hurt me, and in the end, Falconheart killed me. They said I was to blame for their deaths, and they repeated that over and over again. But I know that they would never have said that in reality. I know they loved me just as much as I loved them, and Falconheart would have never killed me. I'm sorry to tell you all this. You probably don't want to hear it, but I'm feeling a little better now. Thank you. Glacio shook his head only slowly, and seemed happy that his prodigy was doing reasonably well again. He thus also gave her to understand that it did not bother him to have heard the dream description. Only now did Cheyenne notice that Adukas was not with her, and she was reminded of her fall at Ballistra Lake when Falconheart was not near her, and she had never seen him again. Panic arose in her. She was very worried, and let her gaze wander around as best as her body allowed. Glacio seemed to sense her uneasiness, and pointed with his finger to the lake to the right of Cheyenne. If you're looking for the fairy wolf, look at the lake in front of you. It is called the Tidal Lake, and we are located in the northeasternmost part of northern Halonia. The only thing there is here are the lake, these few pear trees there, the old tree here that you were leaning against, and these rocks behind me, which block your view of the end of the Sun Passage and offer us a little privacy from all the people who pass by here. The huge mountain you see in front to your right, behind the tidal lake, that's Mount Nightblade. Oh yes, before you worry now, I can reassure you, no one was critically injured, except you. But your condition was not very critical for long. Then you were already on the road to recovery. Quick recovery. A chosen advantage. Glacio winked at Cheyenne. She looked to her right and saw a huge blue-green lake. Tons of herbs grew around him. Water lilies floated on the surface, and reeds protruded from the water. She was reassured when she spotted Sasha and Adukas on the shore.